Hey everyone, Travis Basso here, and I want to do a little walkthrough overview of my generative patch that I made for the Community Challenge 3 for the Bitwig community. So let's dive in. Just gonna hide some things here real quick. So the prompt, if you will, was sort of talking about randomness and obviously generative music all within the grid. So I made one polygrid patch, and I started with a series of random LFOs using some comparators to get various gate signals out. And beyond that and throughout it, I tried to maximize the use of these LFOs, so also mapping them to some parameters, sometimes mapping more than one to some parameters, and sometimes doing things like mapping to these values and averaging, lagging it, trying to sort of smooth out a signal or whatnot. And so a lot of that was just to kind of conserve CPU power, whereas I could just kind of go crazy with lots of modulators. I was trying to keep things to a certain load, if you will, and again, really trying to figure out ways I could reuse and maximize the modulators that were already there. So you see that here going on, okay? And you'll see some of this action with these modulators. Let's see, get a little closer here. And that's just basically, this is a trick I got from Tash, doing some wireless connecting. So these go over here to values, which are just flicking up and on, making triggers. And then you got your regular trigger stuff over here. So, where to begin? The other main thing is I wanted to use just the ratios. So I'm randomizing the rhythm, less so I guess the notes themselves. Maybe the ordering of the notes is random and some other aspects of them, but I guess I'm technically using fixed notes and I'm using ratios. What's fun about ratios, I just found this out while looking into this, is it's not equal temperament, it's just intonation. I might be wrong on that one, but it's a different type of slightly different tuning system. So actually, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so if I'm going to start using the ratios in a patch, they're not going to necessarily mix well with MIDI and other sort of ways, even changing scales. So I got to make sure that everything is coming within the same thing. So in other words, I've got the root going on everywhere, is G sharp 3, and then using ratios on every device. Okay, and that's actually did work, because when I did a previous patch, it was sort of mixing ratios and using some pitch quantization, and just things didn't sound right. And I think this is why, because when I looked into it a little further, using ratios is actually a slightly different tuning system. So the main melody here, again, I got these ratios here. They're going through a gate that's getting stepped randomly, sort of randomly. Maybe it's not fully random, but I'm not using a phase counter. So it's sort of popping back and forth in weird ways. That's doing a union. I'm using the unions because they're sort of like an analog drifting oscillator. Got your triggers here, some chance, splitting up. I'm using a Bernoulli gate here, which just means that it gives a slight chance, a possibility to skip a step, if you will, or introduce a rest or silence. But it's happening pretty fast. But when I actually at one point took off the gate, it changed the rhythm, the melody a bit. So actually I left it there because even though I couldn't, at first I thought it wasn't doing anything, but it was. And randomizing some things there. I'm going to get to the noise perk in a second. Bass drone over here, just some triangles here. I'm getting some harmonics by going through a little distortion here. Low pass filter, some basic stuff here. Blending between two, one's an octave down. Get really slow movement for the skew here, and I forget if there might be a touch of fold going on. Through the push, Triggers here. Sounds nice. Chord drone, I think the idea kind of started around this idea of like, oh, can I build out chords using ratios, and maybe I switch between them, maybe I don't. I think there's probably clever ways to do voice stacking, and so you don't have to double up all the oscillators here, but it seemed too finicky for me to want to try to tackle that. So instead, it's pretty basic, just use a bunch of ratios in the same oscillator. So that's what I did here. Mix them together, get some panning and some changes in volume, some smooth random changes in volume and panning as well. So you got a couple more sample and holds down here, and then this weird thing where I was multiplying to set through a lag, through a modulator. So this is what I was talking about, where instead of adding, say, another sample and hold here, I use two together to produce a different type of, or a different shape for the mod source there. So in conjunction, you get a lot out of it. Send that through a chorus, and the attenuate here is actually doing like, I guess it's not tremolo per se, but there's some volume changes happening on the attenuate as well. Okay, so still all pretty basic stuff here. So the noise perk, sound effect perk. So I got into this thing, which is pretty cool, which is basically set the oscillator to 0, and then you run it with something through the phase, and that phase determines the pitch and the shape of the oscillator. And apparently you're tapping into the wave lookup table, and you can change how it comes out. So that was pretty cool, and I got that from a polarity video on the Formant, and then I started like, whoa, what if we put the sine mod there? What if we put this, that, and the other thing? And suddenly I realized all these phase devices have a lot more power and use than I understood before. So the noise thing was, I knew I wanted to use this setup, but it just I couldn't get it working for the bass. I didn't like it on the chords, didn't like it on the melody, and so I had it floating around, and I was like, oh, what if we do this? So I'm feeding noise and smoothing it into the pitch of the phaser, which is running into the sine mod, Formant, sync, boom. That's driving this triangle oscillator here. Got some comb filter, which is giving it some tonality here, or additional tonality. And then I'm randomizing these low pass, high pass gates, and I'm using a pluck here, just trying to change things up a little. And randomizing that. See, I've got another thing over here with dice and random and getting triggers in and chance and this, that. So that turned into my perk generator. And I'm going to look at the effects in a second, but let's do this. Here's what it sounds like without the effects. I don't know if I need to turn it down at all, but let's... So now you can really hear the perk sound effects, perk generator. Oh, which is also going left and right. It's louder than I would be if I didn't have drenched all these effects, but it seems to need the volume to cut through all the effects. It sounds cool. I played around with mixing it like into the effects, like having a little dry come through, but ultimately I left it with all the effects. So what is happening down here with the effects? Let's see here. All right, so I never used the delay 4, and I had this cool preset called Ghost Winds, which was doing all this weird swooping and detuning stuff. And what I did was, it was using these dual LFOs. I guess I'm not really sure what they do. Oh, interesting. I don't really know. I didn't even know those were a thing, but all I did to change it was they all had sine waves, and I swapped them out for smooth sample and holds, so that way I could get more randomness. And actually it had the effect of, and that's in every one of these pre-slots here and every one of these feedback slots here, and it actually had the effect of smoothing out the effect that this was driving, which was a lot of space, a lot of swooping, detuning, haunting things. You can see it's mixed real high. So that's kind of giving it a lot of foundation there. And then just some basic stuff. You got your your stereo delay there, right? Really nothing special there. Going through some convolution mixed in, shaping it with some EQ into a big old space with the delay plus there. Shaped even further. This EQ did some good good work here bringing some of the highs and lows in and trying to get rid of too much of the mud, if you will. So those are the main effects. Then I'm using a dynamics module here to just increase the overall softness of it without crushing it. That's going into compressor plus, which is really not even actually doing that much, doing a little bit. It's more to get some of the coloring, which I have the saturation here. You'll see that I am driving it and then taking the volume out, and then I just have base mono, right? So take some low end out of the sides there, and I'm pretty sure that's all I have, because I don't think I have anything on the master. Nope. And there you have it. Thanks so much. I've already done a video that maybe you've watched that lets the piece run for a few minutes, and I think I'm going to do a long run version. I'll let it run for like 20 or so minutes. So thanks so much for sticking around and watching. Feedback and tips, welcome, because I'm sure a lot of things I'm doing is just kind of like making up on the fly and just figuring out what works based with what knowledge I do have. So any suggestions and whatnot, always welcome. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you around and or in the next video.